Gordon Farrell. I'm a senior technical director here at Mainframe, and at the time of Beast Wars, I was doing tech support.
And I'm Dave Fracchia. I'm Vice President of Technology, and way back then, I was a senior software developer.
And I'm Robin Shea, currently a supervising animator. Back when Beast Wars was around, I was fresh out of school and a junior animator.
Let's see, way back when I was doing my bachelor's degree, I was working in the SFU graphics lab, and Dave was one of the people I was working with. And after that, I just took a plain old programming job out in the real world. And when that got really dull, I started poking people I knew here about working in animation. And eventually, something came out of that, and I ended up here, and I've had a great time ever since.
I started animation 20-some years ago. I'm one of the old guys here, as these guys will attest to. I actually started in academia, so I was doing research in computer graphics, both in Canada and the States for a while, and was hired at Simon Fraser University in the end of '92. By 1997, about 90% of the software department at Mainframe were my students. So in '97, they lured me in. So they said they invited me to the dark side, and I never went back.
I was on my way to becoming a police officer, and then saw a wonderful little film. It was Terminator 2, and sat there in awe and tried to figure out how did they do that, and how can I learn how to do that. From that moment, I decided to get into animation. Went to film school locally, and halfway through film school, started to find about this wonderful little company, Mainframe, that was currently doing another series, Reboot, and then heard through the grapevine they were going to be doing a Transformers spin-off called Beast Wars. From that moment, halfway through school, I knew I wanted to work here. Basically, from day one of animation, we have a script read-through with the directors. And so we'll go through the script, and one of the most enjoyable parts of it is the director would give each of us a part. And so the animators would sort of vie for their favorite characters. From that, we'd go through the script to get a sense of what was happening, what needed to be built. As animators, we're also expected to model texture and have a full understanding of the software that we're reusing. Sometimes there were limitations in which we called upon the think tank, or the brains of the company, and to provide us with certain software innovations. With the amount of characters in a show, one of the most difficult things was coming up with how to actually get the lip sync from them. And our software department was able to provide us with this version, probably the second iteration, or I guess 1.5 iteration of our proprietary software for lip sync. It allowed us full control over eyes, mouth, nose, anything we needed to actually animate on the character. Having our own software department as well, which is great because turnaround for what we needed was very quick. So if we were limited by the software we were using, generally these gents and their cohorts could, I guess, expand upon what we were given to allow us to give Hasbro and Mainframe the best product that we possibly could. So from the beginning, setting it up, animating, lighting, software in our technical department fully integrated on a daily basis to allow us to complete the shows.
Yeah, our job was really to save production's assets on an ongoing basis. I have to say it. I know.
Yes.
It was such a different time because we had come off of doing the first CG series Reboot, which was the first CG series ever aired, and this was the second. And of course, back then, technology was less advanced, although they were graphic workstations. So to give you perspective, you look at the graphics workstations back then, which were Silicon Graphics, and a lower end workstation would cost around the order of about 15 grand. And you look at some of the higher end ones, and you're starting to look at about $75,000 plus for one system.
Yeah, even up to $250,000.
Even up to $250,000 for some of the
really
larger high-end 4-processor machines. And you look at this perspective nowadays, back then what would have cost you, say, $25,000, now costs in the order of about $2,500. What cost you in the order of $75,000 costs you now in the order of about $5,000. And you're looking at a machine now which is at least 10 times more powerful than it was back then. Back then, we were excited when you got 128 megabytes of RAM maybe 2 processors and a great graphics card. Well, nowadays you're looking at dual core machines with 2 to 4 gigs of RAM with Skookum graphics cards. Quite amazing. And even in terms of software, this was a time when there were no commercial facial animation systems. There were no commercial asset management systems to be able to track where the data was. There were no commercial render farm systems. So all of that stuff had to be written. And of course, the primary one at the time was facial animation, and Beast Wars really did make it a little more difficult than Reboot because there were talking dinosaurs and there were characters that had mouths that extended all the way back to here, which meant that the software needed to handle expression and allow the animators to create expressions and believable facial animation for those kind of characters. So that was a challenge that actually ended up extending version 1 of Grin, which started in '93, to version 2 of Grin at that time. Now we're actually running version 4 and have an even newer solution, which we can't talk about.
And also at the time, we worked very closely with Softimage, who was our primary software vendor. And we had a dedicated contact person there. And whenever we found a problem with the software, we would talk to her, hi Sylvia, and they would do whatever they could to give us either a workaround for the problem or send us a fix for a bug. And yeah, they were really helpful at the time.
In fact, they still do.
Yes, they
It was
still do.
from the actual production floor. As being an animator or a modeling department or our textures, the software department provided us with so many add-ons that over the years they've actually become embedded into Softimage, and even in the iteration of XSI, some of the plugins there I think are a result of the efforts at Mainframe. What now takes us a button push. Back when we were doing Beast Wars, there was about a 10-step process. And of course, in animation, we want everything immediately. And not that we tend to be lazy, I'd say we're efficient, or we want to be efficient. So I think we've come a long way even in help develop the software and push the software in ways that perhaps it wasn't headed.
Oh yeah, I mean, the mistake you can make is having, scientists and computer scientists and researchers actually create the software that artists have to use in a vacuum. It just never works. We work very closely and still work very closely, and I think that hopefully that's the norm in industry as well.
But we still have not written that MF Animate plugin yet.
Yeah, I click on a button and
And
it
the
makes
one button
everything.
show button.
So luckily we get bribed by the animators and production staff not to write that. So although we have it, that's what I'm saying.
Beast Wars, it was a love of a lot of animating. I think everyone who worked on this series loved it. It was just fun. It was fun to work on. You had creative freedom. Pulling off, Waspinator's arm and beating him with it was allowed. And there's just something that's funny about that. Having Megatron in a tub with a rubber ducky is funny. And as a result, a lot of not only the employees here, but the employees' offspring, if you will, loved the series. And this shirt was actually designed by one of the sons of a gentleman, Steve Sachs, who loved the characters. And I'm trying to think of how old he was at the time. I
think 6.
Yes, 6-ish.
Yeah.
And so he came up with this T-shirt, and everyone loved it. As a result, the entire crew got one, and everybody in the building. So there was a time when everybody was wearing one of these shirts. And the great thing about it is, hey, it's from '97, and I've still got it. I wear it enough, but you put it on, and there's sort of nostalgia. People look at it and go, hey, you worked on that series, and the sort of childlike nature of it just sort of epitomizes what Beast Wars was. It was fun, it was lighthearted, but it allowed you the freedom to be creative.
One of the things I loved about the show as well, and it's touching upon what Robin said, is that the show had these complex characters. You had even Optimus Prime, who was very trusting as well, and you had characters like Dinobot, who switched over from the dark side to